Welcome everyone to the MBKCares Wellness Wednesday discussion. Today we are going to be discussing violence prevention. This is an ongoing discussion that we've had during the pandemic. Brother Eric and I, Eric Marsh, decided that we were going to start talking about how mental health was impacting the men, particularly the African American men's community. And we wanted to make sure that we discuss things that were going to be highlighted through the pandemic, being isolated, being self-quarantined, but also having resources that were cut off financially and then socially for us. So through that, we've discussed over the last, is this week 12 now, I believe? We've talked about finances, mental health, suicide prevention, physical fitness, diet, and several other subjects. Tonight, we're going to highlight violence prevention. Going into the summer months, we thought that this was a very important discussion to have. And we have some experts and some people who are socially aware and involved in the community to bring their expertise and their points of views to this discussion. I'll be moderating the discussion along with Eric Marsh from MBK Cares and the Father in Circle. We appreciate our panel. We're going to introduce them and then we're going to get into the discussion now. Brother Eric.
So good evening, everyone. How you doing? As Ihsan said, my name is Eric Marsh. I'm a executive board member with MBK Cares. And also co-founder of the Father in Circle. And tonight's discussion is going to be on violence prevention, specifically addressing the root causes of violence in our community, the impacts that it has on loved ones and the community around those directly impacted, as well as what are some potential solutions and some challenges and solutions that we'll be able to cover. Before we get into the introductions, I just want to say, similar to what Ihsan said, was that this issue of violence in Philadelphia has been plaguing us for quite a while. And unfortunately, we are higher than our statistics from last year, particularly considering that we are under the COVID-19 pandemic. It's absolutely disturbing to see the number of shootings and violence that has happened. And so, as is the mission of MBK Cares, we want to really dig down into the root of the causes and figure out ways that we can help people live better lives and reduce violence. So without further ado, we're going to have our guests introduce themselves. And I'm going to call you off one by one, and feel free to tell us about yourself, your organization, and your role in violence prevention. I'd like to start with Inspector Derrick Wood.
All right, my name is Derrick Wood. I'm Inspector, which is I oversee Southwest Patrol Division, which is the 16th District, the 12th District, 18th District, and 19th District. I'm a 22-year veteran. I've been all throughout the department. I'm really focused on community and police relationships and building that. I've developed and implemented a lot of innovative community events and relationships, whether it was bringing jobs to corners or GD programs. My division is known for that. So I'm really big on looking at the root causes of gun violence and trying to address those. We can't arrest our way out of the problem. So I'm really big on just looking at other ways that we can mitigate this unnecessary violence.
Excellent, thank you. Next up, we're gonna have Jackie Kendrick from CHOP. Jackie, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your program?
Yep. Hi, everyone. As Eric said, my name is Jackie Kendrick. I am the Violence Intervention Supervisor at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia's Violence Intervention Program, and we work with youth after a violent injury. So we're hospital-based and community-focused. We provide trauma-informed intensive case management services and trauma therapy to youth after a violent injury. We really work with the families to provide voice and choice to help identify and address their different needs. These can include mental health, safety planning, education support, legal support, addressing food or housing insecurity, and so on. So I'm really happy to be here today, and I'm grateful to have this opportunity to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate you being here for us as well. All right, our next guest is Richard Washington. Please introduce yourself and tell everyone about your program.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Washington, founder and director of Bringing Everybody Together. It's an organization that focuses on youth and family development. Our goal is to provide as many opportunities to young people and expose them to as many opportunities as possible. And because we focus on the whole child, we anywhere from education to social skills to even violence prevention, These are things we do on a consistent basis. We have been around for 25 years, and we serve primarily the Logan community. However, we do have young people and families that are not just in the Logan, Olney, and Germantown area. And we really pride ourselves on doing things all year long to provide additional support to families, schools, and community organizations. We have a number of partners, including the City of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Police District, the PAL centers, rec centers, the library, et cetera. We believe in extended family, and so whatever we can do to be a support system to the community and to our young people and our families, we do whatever we can to help make those things happen. So again, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for being here. And our last guest for the first hour of the show is going to be Jamal Johnson. Jamal, please introduce yourself and tell us about your organization and work that you do.
Yes, my name is Jamal Johnson, and I'm a member of various organizations, including the Black Male Community Council of Philadelphia. In that organization, we're trying to address the gun violence situation in the communities. Also, get to the problem, for lack of a better word. The thing is that on a grassroots level, as a grassroots activist, I lend myself to any and all type of assistance that I can. The organizations that I deal with, we deal with issues ranging from homelessness to jobs to the violence. Confusion as to why things are so out of control, and I'm hoping that this panel will help me to become more aware of what I can do. And in addition to that, I hope we all can come together collectively to solve the problem going on in our city.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you. So I want to just delve into this topic around violence first by posing these questions to both Inspector Wood and Ms. Kendrick. If you can share in relation to the work that you do, what are you seeing in terms of incidents of violence in the city, and how does this compare to previous years or your time doing this work? And we can start with, let's start with Ms. Kendrick.
Sure. So I think, right now, we are starting to see an increase in violence with our youth, mostly around some gun violence, some concussions, and we're looking normally when summer slowed down and school is no longer in session, we actually see a decrease in some of the violent incidents because a lot of our youth are not safe and they don't feel safe in their schools. And so with school not being, brick and mortar and live right now, we at first saw a decrease in violent injury with our youth because they weren't experiencing peer violence, bullying, so on and so forth, that can often lead to altercation and injury. However, we have in the last week or so seen an increase, and I'm sure everyone has seen on the news that there has been an increase in gun violence for youth and adolescents. So we are starting to see that rise, and I think that might correspond with some of the restrictions and the stay-at-home orders lifting, and our youth starting to get out into the community more.
Interesting, interesting. So it sounds like that the age range that you work with is along the high school and younger. Would that be accurate?
Yes, we work with 8 to 18-year-olds. I would say the majority of our kids, though, are 11 to 17.
Excellent. And Inspector Woods, I think you have a somewhat different perspective considering the work that you do. Tell us, what have you seen in the work that you're doing around gun violence and how it compares to previous years?
I think obviously we're up this year. We're up 21%, almost 22% homicides this year, and also 25% in shooting victims. Homicides, we have 2 people under 18 who were killed this year so far, but between 18 and 34, that spiked significantly compared to last year. One of the things I've noticed in the last few years is social media. A lot of the young people resolve conflict or have beefs over social media. And it's very trivial, but to them, the way they resolve it is usually through, using guns. And they make, for example, they make a rap video and they'll say, I'm from such and such part of the city or location. And usually it's only like a few blocks from other part of the city. And when they go to resolve the conflict, it leads to gun violence, whatever. So a lot of times over arguments. It's not over anything that's really significant. It's really minor stuff that they get mad about. And then, they go spray a whole block or shoot a whole block and people get shot. And it's not really over anything that's really significant or substantial. Not that it's ever okay to shoot someone, but we do investigate it and we make an arrest. It's very, very small and trivial things that they're resorting to violence for.
And has that been the trend for some time, or is that relatively a recent thing?
I think it's been, the last few years, it's been increasing. Like, it's really that social media, like, especially like Instagram, like, is really a really big issue with the, people on Instagram. And they'll do things like, they'll ride through another neighborhood and then say, I'm in your neighborhood looking for you. And they'll videotape each other and then they'll put it on Instagram or Snapchat. They don't use Facebook as for older people. So Instagram is for younger people. And that's one of the things where, it's really been a problem with us trying to, reach out to these young people, Instagram, and they see it. Now they got to respond because they've been disrespected. And it leads to like violence. We had a 16-year-old shot last night. Something that's going on for a very long time. But it's like, it's not anything significant. It's not like, they're shooting each other with kilos or a lot of money. It's just like, I live on 52nd Street and you live on 60th Street. So I don't like you, you don't like me, and if I see you, I'm going to shoot you. And that's the way, that's a lot of it's like that.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, so Richard, can you tell us in the work that you're doing, do you work with young people and you're encountering, and so I'll first, let me preface the question by, I don't want to assume that the majority of this violence is by young people. Unfortunately, the violence impacts us all, but it seems to be that this is the trend that we're hearing. So Rich, do you have any experience working with young people that have been impacted with violence?
Yes. But one, I also work in the school system, and I also have a training business. So I go out and speak to adults, businesses, business and schools regarding, gun violence. Well, I think one of the things in terms of our organization, though, that helps a lot, is that we stay involved, and the challenging part, and I know, we may get to questions later, but one of the things that we know we are challenged with is I'm not even going to use the no snitch rule. We know what that is, but people, holding each other accountable. And I even know just in the area in which, in which I reside, one of the things that helps is trying to build that community, build one big family in spite of the things that are going on. I know that I can, walk to a certain block, for example, and if there are things going on, I used to be a little nervous about addressing people, but we all grew up together. They know if I come around and I hear something, see something, they know I'm going to say something. I'm careful in how I say it, so I'm kind of looked upon as more like the, kind of the big brother, now the old head. I don't feel like I'm an old head, but, the big brother, the old head. So I've watched, most of the people grow up in the area. And even when new people come along, I do the best I can to make sure that at least I'm visible, and, not coming off nasty and wrong, because, again, we got to be careful. But I do know that even when I talk to our young people and even the guys that are 20s and 30s, most of the issues that they have, do come from social media. And unfortunately, those who may be involved in some illegal activity at times, and they do their best. Not that it's a good thing either, but they'll try to take it outside the neighborhood because they also know that inside the neighborhood, we will say something. And that's not just myself. We have other community members who, feel like we're a part of that family. So we kind of try to address it directly ourselves. But yes, dealing with our young people, having conversations, being out there on the basketball courts, asking questions. And then even, as Inspector Wood and I, we talked about it a little bit last week, and again, appreciate him for inviting me to the walk last week. Even, his nephew was also a part of our program. So being a part of their lives and getting a chance to talk with them. So even at that point, being able to talk to all the brothers that were hanging around at the time, even with him, just getting some insight. Hey, what are you guys doing now? How can you be a better impact to our young people? Because it is real. It is real.
Thank you for that. And so you touched on a couple of things about being out in the community. And so Jamal Johnson, I know you are actually out. The reason why you're actually sitting outside now is because I believe that you are on part of your march, right? So tell us about some of the activities that you do in the community and what you've seen, because brother, I've seen you all over the country, not just in Philadelphia, but all over the country showing up to support people doing anti-violence work. Tell us about your experiences. What are some of the things that you've seen?
country to try to see if I could seek solutions that other communities are using to try to resolve the gun incidences that are happening. So I don't look at it in a microcosm. I try to look at it on a larger view in the hopes that maybe somebody's doing something we're not doing, and then bringing that to the various organizations that I'm involved with. One of the things that I'm noticing, we used to talk about how this was about drugs and money and the kids shooting each other for territories. And like everyone has said so far, it seems to be veering away from that somewhat. Not totally, of course, no way. But enough to where now we need to look at the fact that social media's impact is great amongst our youth. So I find that to be a prevailing situation throughout the whole country, from Seattle to Philadelphia. I was in Seattle recently. A couple of young men got killed because of social media. Phoenix, a young man got killed over social media. So, I mean, it's really out there now, even though the other underworld is still doing what they're doing. It's obvious that we got to address this. And so the community groups that I deal with, we're trying to bring more attention to that. We're trying to interact more on social media with some of the youth in the hopes that we can get an insight to where things are going, if it's going awry. And so far, it's been quite a formidable task, but we just keep going at it. The march I'm on right now.
Your signal's going out.
The people coming. I'm sorry?
So start over again. You said the march that you're on right now.
Okay, the march that I am is called Stop Killing Us March. It focuses now primarily on police brutality. Last year, this is the 4th year. The prior 3 years, it focused on police brutality and gun community violence. And the purpose of the march is to go down to the Congressional Black Caucus, which I will be arriving on Friday, and present to them some standards that we think will enable better policing in our communities, but also to get from them what they intend to do to help us in reference to the gun violence that's going on in the communities throughout the nation. So we expect to arrive there Friday to the Congressional Black Caucus at 11 a.m. and to the Department of Justice at 1
p.m.
from the Philadelphia Police Headquarters since June the 5th.
Brother Eric, we lost your sound as well.
I put mine on mute because I had a big truck driving by.
Okay.
But so I'm not sure in terms of the panelists, who might have a background in behavioral health, but I want to kind of dig down into this conversation, and this is something we're going to bring up again when our next guest, Tyrice, comes on later on, is what it sounds like is something that Jamal said, is that the reason behind the shootings are becoming more and more trivial. Inspector Wood, you said it, it's becoming more and more, less and less about money, about drugs, about illicit behavior, illegal behavior, and more about hurt feelings and this sense of disrespect that occurs. So what is the underlying thing that's happening that causes people to act out in violence? And this is for anybody who wants to answer first. What do you think is the underlying cause that causes people to act out in violence?
So I think that we can't talk about violence and gun violence without talking about trauma and the impact that trauma has on our communities. And so we know that ongoing exposure to trauma impacts your brain development. It impacts how you make decisions. And if you are constantly in survival mode, in that fight or flight, you're thinking with your amygdala, you're thinking with that front part of your brain, and it's not activated to take a step back and think through your decisions. You're just thinking about surviving. And so a lot of the times our youth are triggered and they quickly act and respond in violent ways because of the way that their brain has developed because of impact of trauma and the lack of access to mental health and support. So that has a great impact on how our youth are responding to this uptick in social media and this ongoing bullying and peer-to-peer victimization.
So let me ask you, I'm gonna put a little more pressure on you in regards to this idea of trauma. Let's be more specific, because trauma just seems to be a catchphrase that everybody's, it's like a blanket statement that everybody is using, but nobody's actually digging down into, you know, what are the causes of this trauma? What are the kinds of trauma that these youth, our community is experiencing that would lead to that?
Sure. So I think, you know, ongoing exposure to community violence, lack of access to a safe place to just be kids, you know, ongoing, I think we can't talk about this without talking about systematic racism and the trauma that impact, the trauma that brings to our youth, because they are living in poverty and economic instability. They have a lack of educational opportunities. They don't have those community engagement services that other communities may have access to. So all of that can have that traumatic impact on a child.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else want to address that?
Yeah, I would like to add to that. One thing you mentioned, Philadelphia is the poorest big city in America. So poverty has been going on for generations. And one of the things, a story I'd like to share is when I was a captain of the 35th, we went to school on the first day back to school event. And we were there to welcome the kids. We're shaking their hands, high-fiving them. So we're there for like an hour and we're about to leave. And we see a kid leaving with us. And we're like, hey, you got to go back to school. And that was a half a day and they didn't have any food. And he told us, there's no food there. I got to get something to eat. I come to school just so I can eat. So it's the first day of school. He's already cutting school because he had no food at home and he had no food at school. So now he has to go out at 12 years old to find something to eat. So I think the hunger that some of these kids face on a daily basis also, I would consider trauma as well, because now you're in a survival mode because you're 12 years old and you got to find something to eat, which really should be your parent doing that. But you're 12 years old and cutting school to go get something to eat because you haven't eaten in, I guess, a day or so or whatever. So that's also something I think is traumatic for anybody. You know, when you're hungry, no matter how old you are, how much money you have, you want to eat. Imagine being 12 and not being an adult, and you got to go out there some way and somehow to find something to eat.
Richard, tell us your thoughts about this, like these root causes. What's the underlying cause? Once you get behind, why is it that you and I might be able to have a disagreement or, you know, a beef as they call it, and we can settle it, we can talk it out, we can go through this process? Why do you think more and more people and more young people are resulting in violence and choosing to pick up guns to settle conflict?
Sure. And you know, I certainly agree with, again, the mental health and the trauma and the things that we experience. When we talk about young people, in fact, even the young man who may have needed food, you know, their parents a lot of times are going through trauma too, and there's some issues there. I think one of the things that we don't address quite as much is going to the basic needs of survival. And when we talk about survival, of course, there's the food, the shelter, etc. But as you said, Eric, how come you and I can? Maybe because we've had a different upbringing. And the upbringing does not necessarily mean where you're from. You know, you can be in the hood, as they say, and still have, whether it's conflict resolution, depending on the school you go to, basic social skills. You know, how do we communicate? If there is something wrong, how do we figure out how to work it out without being so violent? You know, because you're right. You know, we have issues all the time, and like I said, even in the neighborhoods. But we're not really taught how to deal with it. And I think one of the things that we definitely have to get back to, even in schools, is how do we teach our children to deal with conflict? How do we teach our adults to deal with conflict? Because many times we, you know, as young people, we do what we see our adults do. And if we're, you know, whether it's road rage, because, you know, you can be driving in the car and working at a school. I know one of the more challenging things for me, and I'm at an elementary school, is that, you know, you'll have parents coming up, you know, with the windows down, and you hear them on the phone while the child getting out. They're arguing with whoever they're talking to on the phone, yelling, cursing, talking about what they're going to do when they get back. And then when that type of conversation comes up in the school, you know, and then we're talking to the children, say, hey, do this, do this. Well, the children say, hey, well, that's not what mommy says. That's not what dad says. You know, if I'm mediating third graders that say, look, now I only hit them because that's what my mom said. If somebody say something about me or somebody hit me, I'm supposed to hit them back. So again, getting to that point where we can begin to teach our young people and our adults how to deal with conflict a lot better. If we don't do that, even in spite of trauma, because we all have traumatic experiences. You know, I myself, I've seen people, you know, be shot at. I've been robbed. You know, things happen. But I'm certainly thankful for the people, you know, around me who will support and say, Richard, don't do things this way. I know you might want to hit them. I know you might want to fight, but they become that voice of reason. We don't have enough people around each other being that voice of reason and preparing them for it before it happens, because we're reactive people. If we're not trained, if we're not taught, if we don't talk about it enough before things happen, we're going to be reactive. We have to be able to, you know, work with our young people from, you know, teenagers, etc. And again, going back to the adults, how can we hold each other accountable? How can we be that child that we want our children to be? If we have a hard time modeling what we want our children to be, it's going to be harder for our children to do that. So I think that's extremely important. Being that person to be able to, you know, sit down with our young people and have them talk out issues. But we know when we get out on the street, it's different, because that's the challenge. The street is going to tell you something different. Hit them. Yeah, somebody did this to you. Hit them. How do we get our people to make better decisions and think long term? And so I know when talking to young people, and I try to, you know, answer my question really quick, is that I rarely give solutions. I always ask the young people, okay, well, this is what you want to do. What's going to happen when you do that? Is it worth it to you? Oh, it's not worth it to you? Why is it not worth it? Oh, okay. Well, yeah, you're right, Mr. Rich. Well, I'm going to do something else. What do you suggest? Well, I'm going to tell you what I suggest, but it's up to you. Putting that accountability and responsibility back on them, because if we don't teach our young people to think, we're always going to be reactive because of the traumatic things that we've experienced, and because what we see what our adults do. If we don't do better with that, then we're going to continue fighting what we're fighting.
So you say we're reactionary. Okay. Jamal, do you want to add to that? Any thoughts around, you know, the underlying causes?
Yeah, I would. First of all, you're right. Trauma is a catchphrase. Even our kids using it now. And I feel that it's worn out. And I don't mean any offense to the young lady there, but it just seems that a lot of the stuff we need to go to the grassroots. I mean, we all come from the street, not all of us, some of us, and we all went through the so-called trauma. And I think that the thing that's missing is the same thing was missing in my life growing up, and a lot of other young men, older men I know. That's an image, you know, like the brother was saying. I think we need to get on the street. I mean, I say that over and over to people, and everybody says, okay, you always want to be in the street. But if we're in the street and they see us in the street and they see how we act in the street, hopefully we're doing positive things, it can't help but have some effect. I mean, I just don't believe that we can be present in these young men's lives in the streets and not think that not one of them are taking notice. I do believe they are. When we go sweeping streets with the black men, that's when we first come. And they think we've been consistently coming. And now they talk to us because they know we're there and they know we're going to be back. So imagine if the same men on their blocks are doing the same thing, and that they knew they could go to them when they had a problem. Or if they think that maybe they need to learn something they're not learning properly from whoever they're getting it from, they go to that gentleman instead. I mean, I know it sounds like a simple solution. I don't claim to have a solution, but I do think that's one of them. We need to be present in our communities.
Present in our communities. Yeah, you know, Ihsan, I want to go to you in a second, but I want to share, you know, my thoughts on this because, you know, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with Amos Wilson. Amos Wilson is a lecturer, historian, author, African-American intellectual. And one of the things that he shared in one of his lectures, going all the way back into the mid 80s, early 80s, in fact, was that this idea, when we hear this term black on black crime frequently, right? But going all the way back into the early 80s, Mr. Wilson, Dr. Wilson actually had identified black on black crime is simply a symptom of white on black crime. So as Jackie had mentioned earlier, when we talk, we have to talk about systemic racism. If we're going to talk about violence, we have to talk about the fact that America was birthed in violence. And understanding that there is a culture of violence. Recently, someone shared an email with me that pointed out, you know, these 5 countries where police are unarmed and how low the violence is. But the 5 countries were like Norway, Sweden, Ireland, Great Britain, and and one other East European country that doesn't have the level of the type of history nor the diversity in not only ethnicities and race, but also access to resources. And so I feel like it's important for us to recognize that, what we see out here in terms of violence, our young men and young women out here that are expressing themselves through violence are acting according to the system that we're operating in. We're in an insane system. And to expect people to act sanely, I think is going above and beyond, expecting something that's not realistic. Ihsan, did you want to jump in here?
Absolutely. So I think that everyone is saying exactly the same thing. Like, we're all trying to find solutions, and every piece of information and perspective that's been shared is true. Each of our experiences and expertise is relevant. All of us are trying to find solutions. I want to make sure I say that. As a police officer, I'm pretty sure, and also an African-American police officer, Officer Wood he can relate to who it is, or what type of experience it is to be a Black man in America, but then also someone who has to uphold the law. And I do think that a lot of the things that are going on we're trying to figure out, how do we make the most of this bag of lemons? Like, how do we make lemonade out of something? Like, a circumstance was created a long time ago with plans to exterminate Black people. And a lot of the things that have gone on in our community have been celebrated through hip hop music, through success stories. People see, and this is not a slight at Jay-Z, he's my favorite rapper, but people may see, I can sell drugs and I can make it to the top, but they don't understand that that's one person who made it to the top, opposed to probably millions who tried to go the same journey. Or I can play basketball and make it to the top, as opposed to looking at there's only a few hundred people in the whole NBA. And on the journey to get to those places, people take each other out. People die on basketball courts. In my neighborhood, people die on basketball courts, and basketball tournaments seem like every summer. And I mean, that's a place where people are going to relieve stress and be active and try to be in some type of community, but people get jealous. But the systemic stuff is real. And I think that it is important that that stuff is addressed, because you're putting us in a cage and we're all in survival mode. And that cage doesn't just look like us fighting each other. It does look like us trying to eat. It does look like us trying to understand what it is to be a man without having a father around to affirm us, without having fathers in the community to be the Black men. Like, right now, this right here, to show an image of Black men, this is not the case in every block. It's not the case. So you have people trying to figure it out on the job. As Inspector Wood said, you got kids at 11 and 12 trying to find out how do they provide a meal versus going to school, when they shouldn't have to do that. I can't imagine my baby girl and my sons actually having to wonder where they're going to get a meal. I would like to ask, what are some ideas of, Jamal, I know you're journeying right now. You're on your way to DC, I believe, right?
Yes, sir.
And you talked about
Yep.
how as you travel, you get different ideas. From your experience from traveling, but also just your own ideas that you have, what are some resources that you think would be helpful for the Philadelphia community right now?
Well, I think the first resource we need is we need to get the community to believe as best as we can in the police, believe it or not. I think that somehow we need to bring together the police and the community again, because I do think that there's a big, severe gap. I think they reinforce that gap in some of their behaviors, and we do the same thing. And with the current protests going on about police brutality and racism, personally, I don't know where everybody's been, because this has been going on since I was a baby. But now that we all recognize it, I think that the police have to reach out to us as much as we reach out to them, and we need to keep our hands together in trying to solve this problem, legislatively and physically. That means on the street. Personally, I have a problem with the way police is going in Philadelphia, or lack thereof, but I do believe that that could be a major building block of what's going on, because they're out there more than we are. So who else is there that's going to see what's going on, if they want to see it, that's happening in our neighborhoods? So I think we need to start there, truly. I know that's probably an unorthodox way of looking at it, but that's just what I believe.
Yeah, I'm going to transition over to Officer Wood from that point. I have noticed that there are some officers who have taken on that mantle. I've seen a police officer actually on 52nd and Market in the past out there singing and like dancing. I've seen all kinds of things where maybe they've been playing basketball or whatever, but trying to connect and show young people we're human too. And I also want to make sure, I want to speak on behalf of officers and people who are in roles where they're often criticized, right? Because we have legislators who get the blame of you're just a bad politician, officers you're bad politicians. They're not all that way. Just like we're not all criminals when a black man commits a crime, and we're not all what we were made out to be from stereotypes. Officer Wood, are there any solutions that you could recommend to bridge the gap between the community and the police that you would like to see, or that may actually exist that you would like to share?
Well, I support the peaceful protest. I think what is bringing about is change that should happen a long time ago. I think in order to build the trust between the police and the community, we have to be transparent. And some of the things that have passed in city council and some of the things that the mayor said he's going to do is going to increase that accountability and that transparency. People think sometimes we're not really hiding things. People don't know where to find it. And some things we have hid in the past or whatever. And really, if we let people see it, it's not going to be any great revelation. What it will do is let people see, okay, this is what our policies are all listed online for anyone to see, and they have been for years. All of our police shootings are online, and people can see the status of those investigations. Now, which also, this right here was never a secret. When the city had a proposal what they wanted, like for our next FOP contract, they would send it out to everyone, but no one paid attention. So now the city council basically passed, I think, an ordinance or a law basically saying it has to be, published now. But it wasn't published before. No one really paid attention. So now people will see that, and they'll have a voice in that and say, hey, I don't like that. What you ask for this or that. So I think those kind of things are going to build trust. We do the thing, playing basketball, singing on the corners, do a lot of meetings, trying to give people jobs, GEDs, all that's great. But we're here to serve you. And I think for that service, you deserve to know what's going on in our department, and you should have a say in how we police your city. So those things are more, I think, systematic and systemic, and they will help in a long run, 10, 20 years from now, to build that relationship. When people feel like they have a say in how they're policed, and then they don't have a say how you're policed, I think that creates animosity and mistrust. So we're transparent, and you can see what's going on behind the scenes. I think it'll, in a long run, that'll be very good for the city. So I'm 100% behind police reform. I've been that way. It's not something new for me. Anyone that knows me knows I've been saying this for years or whatever. So I'm really excited about that, and hopefully moving forward, it'll help build that trust between the community and police department, because they'll see what we're doing and they can have a say in how we police their streets in the city.
With those types of relationships, do town watches still exist right now in Philadelphia?
Yes, we have a town watch. It's called Twist. They have a Twitter account. I believe they're on Facebook as well. It's ran by Anthony Murphy.
Okay.
If you want to have it in your block, all you have to do is contact them, or you can contact your local police district, talk to the community relations officer, and they'll get the information for you. But they're still out there. Rob Ryan is in this section of the city. He'll give you training and tell you what you can do to help make your neighborhood safer. So they're still around, and they're very effective. So we encourage people to sign up for Town Watch.
Okay. I want to transition back to Jackie, but also thought the Town Watch would be important because Brother Richard was talking about how he can go to certain neighborhoods and speak and feel comfortable there. And I think that's a representation of how the community can work together to actually first of all, decrease violence, but also take on some of the responsibility that we expect only the police to handle, taking on the mantle for our own community. Jackie, do you have any ideas of any resources that you think would be helpful that don't already exist, or some that we haven't mentioned that could bring about more partnership within the community in this issue of violence?
Yeah, so I think that we need to look at not just the police, but other systems that I know our youth have grown to not trust anymore. So I think that it really boils down to the fact that the social contract and this trust has been broken, not just with the police, but with the other systems that are involved in our youth's lives, like schools, DHS, the juvenile justice system. And so I think working within those systems to create spaces where kids feel safe again is also going to allow for that trust to build up, and to work on reform, to work on within the juvenile justice system to look at rehabilitation and access to mental health through that system, through DHS as far as meeting concrete needs and really seeing them as a resource for our families to help them gain access to services that they might not know about, and reframing that organization to not look at it, for people to not see it as a bunch of social workers that take kids away. I think that it's a multi-systemic issue that we really need kind of an all hands on deck approach, where we have to look at each and every system that interacts with our youth and our families and look at different ways to reform them. When we were talking about having voices in the community and examples for our youth to look up to, one of the things that we do at VIP is we facilitate a peer mentoring program. So we have a program called Brave, which is building resilience after a violent event.
Wow.
And we work, it's really led by peers who have gone through a violent event and have been able to be resilient and be successful in different components of their life. And they really run that group with us to talk to youth about different symptoms of PTS after a violent event, but also conflict management and conflict resolution and how to integrate that mind-body connection. So I think that that's another, we need to see more of that, of programs that are led by youth that are not too far off of the ages of the kids that we want to connect with.
That particular program you mentioned, is that also address things like domestic violence?
So while domestic violence does come up in our program, as far as connecting our families with needs, if that is happening, it doesn't necessarily, that's not an actual topic of the group. We do work with Lutheran Settlement House, to offer a healthy relationships group after our Brave group. So we do recognize that we want our kids to have healthy relationships with their partners and with their families. So we do offer a separate group after the Brave group around healthy relationships.
Okay. Eric, I'm sorry, you got it.
Yeah, no, I actually, so I wanted to touch on something that Jackie just said, because I feel like it's important to not skip over the fact that, DHS was brought into the conversation, right? I think one of the things that I'm going to keep coming back to in my conversation around violence in the community is the systemic racism and trauma and oppression, systemic racism that causes the trauma in our communities that leads to dependency on agencies like DHS, right? Why do we live in a country or in a community that actually has to have systems like this in place? And why are these systems have a reputation for taking children as opposed to rebuilding families? I know that they're working on trying to, revamp their entire network. I know we all know what happened, well, most of us know what happened, what caused the creation of the community umbrella agencies, or the CUAs, that created, these community-based hubs that families are supposed to be able to go to. But for me, it really goes back to the fact that we have a federal government, we have a culture in this country that does not support the people that are in most need. And so because of those systems that are in place, it creates this ongoing systemic generational trauma that leads to people being dependent on the system, that leads to domestic violence, people not being able to manage conflict, children going to school without food, things like this. And so I feel like on a systemic level, we really need to figure out a way to address that primarily. But I wanted to give Jamal a chance. I know, Jamal, you got to get ready to go. It's getting late out there. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to share some last few words before you completed your leg of the journey for tonight. Anything you want to share with us before you go?
Yes, first I wanted to give my condolences to Inspector Wood for your loss. Also, I would say thanks for inviting me to the panel. And I hope that I represent the line of DC and into the congressional Black Caucus and the Department of Justice on Friday. But I appreciate your time and I appreciate you inviting me.
Excellent. Well, thank you, brother. And I just want you to know that we are marching with you in spirit, if not physically. So looking forward to seeing you when you get back to Philly.
All right. Y'all take care.
All right. Have a good night. So for those that are still left here, one of the things that we want to move into is I don't know if we necessarily want to move into solutions, because I don't know if we've really explored the impact of violence the way that we really should have. I think we jumped into the conversation about trauma, but we know that trauma is often, the way we've been discussing it tonight, trauma is the trigger for violence. But can we talk about trauma as a result of violence? So what are some of the things that you've witnessed or you're aware of that come as a result of violence? What are some of the impacts, both physically, emotionally, financially? What are the impacts on individuals, families, and communities who are suffering gun violence? And this is for anyone who wants to jump in.
Well, probably could go on for some time about that question. We're impacted by so many ways, and I'm going to kind of incorporate some of the comments that, even some of our parents, even were making on live. We're impacted, in so many different ways. And I think it also, going back to some of the reasons why it happens, one of the comments was, talking about movies and music and images, things that we see and how the media, has a role in this. We're impacted by it because when a child gets hurt, not only or anybody gets hurt for that matter, not only does it hurt one. I don't remember who I was having a conversation with earlier this week, but the way they said it, I wish I could repeat it directly. Had these conversations before, but one person gets hurt, it doesn't just affect that person. It affects the family. It impacts the community. Some people may cry about it. People may laugh about it as not laughing as it's a joke, but it may be their coping mechanism. Then you have those who want revenge, and then it just catapults into so many different things. It impacts us financially. Even taking a look at what's been going on over in the news in the last couple of weeks. With the rioting and the looting and things like that, it caused violence with that. And how does it impact us in certain ways? Families can no longer, they don't feel safe going to the stores. They don't feel safe going to get medicine. People begin to isolate themselves. People don't want to talk to people. People have a harder time building relationships because the more violence happens, the more we lose trust in each other. And we know that when we talk about building relationships, building communities, building relationships with the police officers, it's about building trust. And it's harder to build trust when we see so much violence going on, because you don't know who to trust. If I'm a black man, but sometimes if I'm walking, in a certain area, sometimes I'll turn my back just to make sure, hey, you know what, I'm okay, because I don't know you, and the way you're approaching, I need you to approach me, a little different than you are, because of something that maybe I've experienced in the past. Like I said, I've been robbed before. It was only once, but you remember those things. So how do we? And I know we're not talking about the solutions yet. We're just talking about the impact. But how do we overcome those things? When things happen, it impacts so many different ways. Now it means, instead of not just trusting that person that may have helped me up with a gun, but now I'm looking at other people when they come this direction. That's not how we want things to happen. In order for us to create that community, create that family we need, we got to be able to talk about these things. We got to be able to communicate. One of the parents even said, conversations even with the police department, conversations with our neighbors, conversations with our young people. These are things that have to happen, because we are all impacted when one thing's happen. Again, I don't mean to keep bringing it up, Inspector Wood, and I hope you don't mind. But again, with Tyshawn, that situation, again, it hurt. That was your nephew. That was my young guy. And now I wanted to reach out to all the other young brothers that, all played ball together, because it doesn't just impact one. It impacts the community. And so the conversation should be, what do we do to help change that? Because if we don't have those conversations and we don't become more actively involved in making those things happen, it's going to continue to happen no matter how we look at it. Eric, it looks like you're speaking, but you're on mute.
Sorry, kids in the background making noise. Thank you. What I was saying was, in the work that I was doing and have been doing in the community, I've got a chance to talk to a person who was a physical therapist, right? And so I asked this question about the impacts because one of the conversation I had with a physical therapist was that not everyone who gets shot dies, right? We often hear about homicide, we hear about gun violence, but we don't hear about the long-term medical conditions that people are often left with as a result of gun violence. My earliest experience was as a teenager growing up, where one of my friends became a paraplegic from getting shot. And so he spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair, and unfortunately he died at a relatively early age as a result of complications from those injuries. We see people all the time who might have colostomies, or who might be paralyzed on one side or one part of their body. And then also the impact that it has on family members. So is there something that anyone wants to share in relation to that? What are some of the other impacts that I think that if we talk about these things that maybe might give someone a second chance, that like think twice before they result in violence? Anyone else wants to touch on
To
that?
add some statistics, 17 homicides this year have been as a result of retaliation. So someone's killed because of earlier violence. So it perpetuates that and it causes more violence. Also, you get a homicide trial, the person who was arrested for the homicide, sometimes it costs $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to get a good defense. So that impacts your family. Unless you come from a rich family, in most cases, these people are not rich. They're, like I said, it's the poorest big city in America. So you're taking it from your family. We have to remortgage your house. Your grandma has to sell her house just to give you a good defense. After you maybe have been charged with a murder or whatever. So that's how financially can hurt you, whatever. Also, when a father is killed, or a man is killed or arrested for a homicide, now you have a home with no father figure, maybe for life or for a long period of time. In my personal experience, I had 2 nephews that were murdered. One was 18 and one was 22. So that's generations of my family that are gone. My sister, whose son died 13 years ago, she talks about it every single day since then. Every day on her Facebook page, she posts photos of him. So she's never got over that. So that's the effect it has on a family, where you bring him up, she'll start crying. And it's been 13 years. So she'll never get over that. So the impact is real, and it'll last a lifetime in most cases.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people fail to see the personal connection, and with all of you who are here, the work that you do, I'm sure it reaches home, and you take it back home with you on a personal level. So thank you for sharing that information. Ihsan, you had a question from Facebook that you wanted to ask?
Yes, I actually want to introduce Ty McCoy before I do that, because this question may be something she could best answer. So Ty McCoy is here. She's joining us. She's a therapist from Philadelphia area, and she is joining us to discuss violence prevention. Ty, have you been listening to any of the discussion already? Would you like me to bring you up to speed? I think you're muted.
You know what?
Okay.
Please bring me up to speed. I've been in sessions today.
Okay, so we've been discussing violence prevention and talking about relationships between the community and the police. We've also talked about the effects of trauma resulting from violence, and then also trauma that inspires violence or that can lead to violence. And we also talked about responsibility of humans and Black men, women, whoever, just in the community. What can we do to ease the load that we place on people in power, whether that be police, politicians, anyone? I think we failed to actually talk about the role of the church, but I will get into that as well. But I wanted to bring up a question for you right now. We have one of our viewers, a Facebook viewer. Her name is Caitlin Boyle, and she actually asked a question: can you discuss how and where mental health support needs to be better integrated in terms of our violence? Are you okay with that question?
I guess, you know what? I guess I'm okay with that question, because it's kind of what I do. I believe that mental health can be and needs to be integrated on every layer of the system. We start at home, individual, family, couple, group therapy, police officers, those who work in any capacity when they work with people, such as EMTs, doctors, nurses. I believe that people need a space to outlet. They need a space to be able to express what they've been going through, their traumas, get healing from their trauma, deal with the pain that they go through on a regular basis, be able to make sense of the questions in their mind, have the hard conversations with their loved ones, as well as the hard conversations with themselves and with God. How do I get past my pain? How do I get past what they've done to me? What do I do when it feels like everything I try doesn't work, and this one guy right here isn't letting me move forward? All you listen to is my rage. All you listen to is my anger. So where's a positive reinforcement for me to move forward with that? And sometimes we just need a person that'll hear us out, that'll give us more coping skills and strategies when we don't find that at home, because there's modeling for a person to use force rather than go into a space of understanding. Because honestly, we get it honest. Anger has been passed down from generation to generation to generation in some families. And I believe that as long as we can sit down and work together, we'll be able to work on some of the areas of violence and utilizing violence to quote unquote solve a problem or to get something done. We'll be able to actually work through that and past it. It's not the only solution at all, but it is a portion of the solution.
I really love what you just said. I think that one of the solutions that I've really come to appreciate is to see people step up and give young people a voice. I've seen that be the work of Richard Washington. He actually worked with my daughter. My daughter went to Logan School and graduated from there last June. And I've known Brother Richard before even seeing him work with my family. I've seen him because he was a presence in the community. And I think that that right there is a testimony. We also want to acknowledge somebody else in the community who may be watching, but I know the work they're doing, it is out there. And I think that celebrating what's already going on is important because people are made for significance. One of my therapists in the past, his name is Dr. Randolph Walters. He told me like some of the things that I was experiencing inside were from an inner cry to feel significant. So I believe that if someone is actually expressing violence, sometimes it's for a rep or street cred. Those are just other terms for endearment that try to make yourself feel significant. But I want to shout out James A. and his organization, Yeah Philly. They're doing incredible work in the city of Philadelphia and Southwest Philly and West Philly to allow young people to have a voice and allow young people to become community activists on their own level. They go out, they feed people. They've been active during this whole pandemic, feeding people and just doing the work and teaching young people work ethic and teaching young people that we are owners of our community. We're owners of ourselves. So I just wanted to shout him out. That was just on my mind just now at that moment. I do want to ask brother, sorry, I keep calling you brother. I'm used to talking to church people. Inspector Wood, are there any type of counseling and therapy programs within the police department? Do they have like an EAP program or any type of, if the officer is exposed to a violent incident, do they go through some type of therapy or something like that? Or if they are not the perpetrator, but if they're the person who's had to use their gun during an arrest or during any type of exchange, do they go through therapy for that?
Yes, if you're involved in a critical incident, you automatically, you're not allowed to come back on the street. You're still in investigations. You may not come back on the street until investigation is completed, or during that process, you have to see, go to EAP with your peer counselors. Then you are referred to Penn Behavioral Health, which are people that are licensed, like to be psychiatrists, psychologists, and therapists, and things like that. Also, something we have, we're actually having one tomorrow, myself and one of the deputies, Deputy Wimberly, and we'll have somebody from EAP, and we'll have a Zoom call because we can't do it in person right now. We have officers on there, they'll talk about how they go, what they're going through and things like that. We'll offer them support and how they can get help, and then talk to people offline as well. And I also know that the commissioner and the department is also in the process of creating an officer wellness program, a better one, and also a better peer support program than we currently have, which will be more comprehensive. So I think the program we have now is good, but we want to make it better. And we're working on that right now. So we meet probably like every week, sometimes 2 times a week. Right now, being a Black officer right now is not the easiest thing. It's never been easy. Right now it's very difficult. And a lot of officers are dealing with that. So we're making sure we're there to support them and talk to them and let them know they can express their feelings. And if they need to talk to a licensed therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist, we refer them to that. So we definitely have a program, and we're actually going to make it better. And something should be coming out very soon and released to the public, let them know exactly what we offer to officers.
That's really good to know. I know that the EAP program, that's a citywide program. I work for the city as well. And I'm going to just give this resource out to any of our viewers and anyone else there who may be employed by anyone other than the city. Most employers have a program called the Employee Assistance Program, EAP for short. That program allows you to see a therapist for 3 visits, typically 3 visits, sometimes 2, sometimes more. And you get to see a therapist for free. And that gives you an opportunity to seek the help you need without the financial burden, and also to get it immediately if you have a loss of life in your family, if you're just going through anything, if you have an addiction, if you have any type of trauma, this gives you an opportunity to just go and vent to someone and get the help. It's private, it's confidential. The information does not get reported to your employer. It's for the city, it goes through Penn Behavioral Health, and they actually connect you with a psychologist or a therapist throughout the city. There's a long list of those therapists as well. I wanted to ask you also, Jackie, are there any programs through CHOP beyond the violence intervention program? Are there any type of therapy programs for young people?
Yeah, so we have several. So there's, Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids, which works with youth in the community. We also have the Department of Children and Adolescent Psychiatry and Psychology that do behavioral health and medication management if needed to support our youth for for dealing with whatever either trauma or behavioral issue they might be having. I think we are also, moving towards an initiative to partner with other community agencies, such as like Hall Mercer or PHMC, and to really look at how to broaden the services that we do offer and to be able to be more comprehensive.
I want to just make a comment, and I guess Officer Wood, you may actually be able to address this.
Good.
Right now, a lot of things that are going on in the city sound like gunshots constantly, and it's not. It's actually explosives. Anybody else out there experiencing this?
Absolutely.
All right. So just wondering, traumatically, can those things impact our mental health, just hearing those types of things? And if so, how so?
I mean, I think that one of the things I heard some people who are maybe in a war, PTSD, I think that they were talking about how that takes them back, having flashbacks is not good for them. People who have pets. And just to basically, we've had a homicide in relation to that. People, like I said, back to what we were talking about tonight, a conflict resolution. One neighbor was setting off, I believe, fireworks, and it got too close to the other neighbor, and they had a dispute, and someone was killed as a result. So we've had a lot of violence around this, where people are fed up. At my Facebook page, and my brother lives in West Philly, and he knows I'm in charge of West Philly. So he called me, "Can you send a car about here? They're out here in the corner letting off fireworks." So it's really, people are really fed up about it. And from our perspective, like, if they're set on certain times at night, we can do something about it. But a lot of times, by the time we get there, it's over. I think people are fed up, and the way people deal with them sometimes nuisance problems in Philly is, through violence. So we hope that there are no more shootings involving these fireworks. But I definitely think that it's becoming basically people are just tired of it. And I see that on my Facebook feed, my Twitter feed, my family calling me, people stopping me when they see me in uniform. And there's not much we can do as far as, it was made legal. That's something the legislature has to get involved in and change the law, because people want to set fires. It's going to be going on. July 4th hasn't even came yet. So imagine what it's going to be like on July the 4th or Labor Day and things like that, or New Year's Eve this year. Like, it's going to be really bad. And hopefully people will deal with it without resorting to violence.
Ty, do you
It's-
have any suggestions for
I,
us that we could deal with, that we could actually do, we can practice to cope with this stuff? Because I know for me personally, it's interrupting my sleep. You're muted again. I'm sorry.
I I had to pause because I have to utilize the same coping skills as well. Um, so I will say this: white noise machines can help, or even your favorite music if you can play it over a night, throughout the night. Not so loud, but where your mind gets used to the sounds at a certain decibel. So if you're hearing the whatever going off while you're sleeping, your mind is used to listening to that music. Um, I would say letting yourself know, and the children who are home, if they're not thinking about these, they're like, what's going on? Because sometimes I know around my way, I don't know what these things are. The ones that shake my house. What are y'all using? Is it mini dynamite? I don't know. But I need you to not be shaking my house with it a block away. Um, and so telling yourself, telling the children, you're safe. It's fireworks. You're safe. It's fireworks. They're celebrating. I did a video. I'm like, listen, our people out here celebrating life. The reframe and finding humor in it, because we can't control it. A lot of folks are becoming anxious. Outside of those who are struggling with PTSD, I remember during the times of when there was rioting going on, and people they were letting off fireworks. I started to feel, like, is that fireworks or are these gunshots? Because I'm used to hearing gunshots, and I'm also used to hearing fireworks. But while there's a little bit unrest in the street, I didn't need to hear both of them. And it is kind of frazzling. So reminding yourself that it's okay, you're safe,
Okay.
um, and having that music in the background.
Excellent. Thank you for that. One of the things I wanted to kind of extend this conversation about ideas and solutions to the broader conversation about ending violence, or dealing, I don't want to say dealing with violence, right? Because in a way that's almost like accepting that it exists, and we know it exists. But what are some ways that and this is for all of our guests, but I'll start with you, Ty. What are some ways that we as individuals, family members, and communities can begin to lessen the need for violence? What are some ways that we can help people cope with and manage the things that lead to violence, so that they won't act out in ways that harm other people?
I would say first starting your sphere of influence. Okay. A lot of times we will want to solve global problems with a sphere of influence that, is as big as our support systems currently, until we connect with others who connect with others. So starting your sphere of influence, educating on communication, um, on effective communication skills, listening, understanding, seeking to understand before you react and respond, recognizing your triggers at home first starting with you, right? Um, because the truth of the matter is, some of the people that we're talking to can be quote unquote preaching to the choir, but that's where we are right now. We're going to talk to the people who would listen to this, who may or may not engage in violent act, but we can't assume. So first starting to regulate self, teaching the children how to engage with one another and have conflict without utilizing violence, moving forward, and moving into some of our older adults. When you're starting to get all stressed out because we are currently still in a pandemic, recognizing that we're dealing with low grade fight or flight on a regular basis, low grade stress on a regular basis. So, navigating that stress. In terms of our community, and where we may see violence more, moving in areas of transportation, so issues on our streets with uh, road rage, or in our communities. Uh, There's nothing more calming than knowing that you are seen and that you are heard. It's not easy to walk past a group of people who may look like they may be disturbing the peace or doing something else and not acknowledging them. But I will tell you, there's nothing more calming than someone seeing you and saying hello, right? Treating each other like human beings, bringing calm and decency back into the community, organizing. Yeah, we can have programming, but the ones who need it, are they really going to take advantage of that programming, right? So I honestly, I do believe that uh, jobs, mentoring, and opportunities for those who normally wouldn't get the opportunities, even if it's meeting them where they are. For those people who have it in them to speak and to spend time with those who are maybe out on the corners or who are engaging in risky behavior in our neighborhoods and wherever else, bringing dignity back to these young men and young women. In my work in Camden and in Philadelphia, I have found that the need for connection, the need for family, the need for a norm has driven many into the gangs and into violence and street violence. So honestly, developing more organizations that bring that sense of family back into the community, because we have so much connection to information but disconnection from each other. And the more that we can have more connection to develop a sense of family, I believe that people will be less apt to hurt one another, um, less apt to hurt one another. Because like I said, I'm moving from self and out slowly, 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 because there are systems in our streets that have been set up for years and years and decades, gangs and organizations where they call it, they feel like it's safety. They feel like it's safety in numbers. And honestly, on some level in their minds, it is, because of the spaces where they decide to go in, whether it's because of the need for resources at home, whether it's food, money, clothing, or just to have a better life. I would like to see anyone that comes into our communities for gentrification. I know I'm going past the sphere of a therapist, but for
No,
y'all
go
who
ahead.
don't know,
Go ahead.
I'm also an engineer and a construction manager. So for those who would come into our communities to gentrify them, what are you going to do for our community? What systems are you going to put in place? Are you going to partner with a community organization that's helping people, that's bringing jobs, that's bringing in opportunities? You want to make money here? I need you to spend money here. Because some of our organizations that have boots on the ground, they need funding, and your development company can give them the funding that they need because you want to make money in our location. And so that's ways that we can get more traction for some of the women and the men who are in the community, that some of our young men and women may actually listen to. They may actually hear what they have to say, but they need funding and they need help. And of course, uh, I strongly believe people need hugs, man. People need hugs, okay? And I'm not joking either. I mean like an actual hug. Like people
Yeah,
need
yeah,
hugs. Because
I agree.
there's nothing like non-sexual contact with another human being
Mm-hmm.
that helps to soothe all of the mess in us. And I ain't talking about walking around. Actually have a shirt that says 7 free hugs.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can take your life, it's because on some level, life, living, and understanding that your life matters has been taken away from me.
Mm-hmm.
how can reconnect me back to myself?
Mhm.
And it happens slowly. My the young men and women that hang out, they know me. I'm like, hey, how y'all doing? What's going on? You know, have a conversation. They still human.
Mhm.
So that's what I have. Cause y'all know I got to say therapy, right? You know, therapy is the key.
No, I
But
feel like
I
that,
honestly believe it's multi-systemic.
yeah. No, what you just shared was therapeutic. That's what I'm gonna say. That was therapy for me. I don't know about anybody else, and I know folks on Facebook are commenting and praising and like saying thank you. But that was absolutely therapeutic because it does sum up. Like we're all human beings, and I think once we get into this conversation about statistics and violence and homicides and even someone earlier questioned why do we even use the term black on black crime because it's a false narrative, but I used it earlier in context, in context of the quote that relates black on black crime as a symptom to white on black crime, and there's a systemic problem, and we're really losing our humanity. So thank you for that reminder. Thank you for that refresher, because I think we absolutely needed it. And honestly, this is open to anyone. I don't know who wants to follow that mic drop. But I'll be more than happy. We're coming up close on time, but I do want to hear, you guys, please share, like, what are your thoughts? What do you feel like is the way forward out of this violence? What are some solutions that we can actually implement or that we can support? There's some organizations like Ty mentioned, our circle of influence. Some of us have broader circles than others. What do each of you suggest or recommend that we can do? I'll make it a little more challenging. What can we do as individuals, and what can we do as communities to actually address the issue of violence? And what are some resources that you want to share? And I'll start with Jackie if I'll.
Sure. Well, Ty, everything that you said, and like, just my heart is with you now. I think on an individual level, we can vote, we can fill out the census because that's going to determine some of the funds that communities get for the next 10 years. So that is important. We can continue to take personal responsibility in educating ourselves and learning about the things that we don't know, and be okay with saying, I don't have the answer to that, or I don't know how to answer that, but I'm going to figure that out and I'm going to educate myself. And I think contacting legislators and advocating for policy change and for reform, I think moving forward, we really need to look at these systems that have continued to create disparities and punish communities of color. And we need to raise up the voices of our communities in a way that makes them feel valued and makes them feel heard, like Ty was saying. And so, signing those petitions and pushing for policy that really institutes real change, I think is something that we can do on an individual level. On a larger level, I think investing in what matters and looking at the budgets of cities, and looking at, programs like mentoring and social supports and parks and rec and creating safe places for our youth and our families to be, and investing in local businesses, of communities, to uplift them and to put funds into those communities so they have educational opportunities, they have more economic growth and economic opportunities. All of that is really important because the communities that are the safest are not the communities that have the most police. They're the communities that have the most resources.
Exactly. Thank you for that. Richard, do you want to go next? What are some solutions that we can do as individuals and as communities to help reduce this violence?
Well, first of all, I want to say, thank you again, Ty, for your comments. And I know one of the questions that came across a little earlier, I guess it was prior to the call, is how even the pandemic changed. The only reason why it changed things a little bit, only reason why I'm throwing it out there, and I definitely wanted to hear from you, Ty, if you get a chance. But you're right. There's that old school song that said, "What the world needs now is love, sweet love." I mean, yeah. And so when you mentioned the hugs and things like that, I totally agree with you that we definitely need that. But I also know, like right now, the reality is it's become tougher because we're even told you not even shake hands. So that's still something we have to consider. Like, how do we actually do that? Do those types of things and spread that love and build those connections in the light of what's going on right now. So that's something you can answer now, but or I mean, something we could think about. In terms of some of the other solutions, individually is and it's a challenge, but to be present and to spend a little bit of time. And for me, although I know you guys see me out there, it is a struggle sometimes because in my head, sometimes I want to say, you know what, let's just take time for yourself. But I know that what helps is that sacrifice of being present, being out in the schoolyard when before things happen, walking around the neighborhood, as someone mentioned earlier, literally just to say hi. I think I say hi and beat my horn so much. People get used to responding, but I'm like, I probably beat them 3 times a day just to say hello. And they probably like, why is he beating me again? Didn't he just say hi 15 minutes ago? But I really do believe that those things help. Just being a presence in the community and building those relationships, because relationships go a long way. We can do things in relationship that people who don't have a relationship can't do. I can go say, hey, stop. Hey, how's it going on? Because we have a relationship, I can't go other places and do that until, and I'm using the word until, because even though I may be in another neighborhood, my goal, no matter where I am, is to build a relationship, because you never know who you're going to meet. So individually, spending a little bit of time, sacrificing that little bit, and building relationships is certainly key. I also think as a community, it's important that we, again, not just provide resources, but think a couple of, there are programs, and one of our guests mentioned it even on Facebook Live as well, that there are a number of programs, but how do we get those who need it to want it? Because that also becomes a problem. Many people say all the time, there's not enough programs, there's not enough this. That's not true. There's a lot of resources. There are a lot of things out there. Even each of us alone on this panel, and there are other Zoom calls going on right now, because there are programs, there are resources. But the ones who take advantage of it are the ones who may not need it quite as much. It's just like church. I know Brother Ihsan, you say, I use the word brother too. All right. If you're only in the church, then that doesn't serve some of the people who may need it more than just those who are in those walls. We need to be out there. We need to be present, because again, going back to the community, and I'm going to use the schoolyard as an example, or a rec center, or a playground, that when we are present, certain things won't happen just because we are present. If we're not there, then anything goes. I know people are not lighting firecrackers the whole time if we're there. Now, not naturally, I ain't going out at 1 o'clock and just to hang out to make sure it ain't happening. But being present certainly is necessary. And the last thing I share, because I can go on all day, this is passion. This is what we do. Is let's think about how we can get other people to win. Most of us have the "what's in it for me" syndrome. If people are out here selling or doing things or resources, economics, I'm hoping to find some agencies and some organizations, and this is just one example, to feed in some money, because we have some of our teenagers are only selling or only hanging with certain groups because they don't have resources. If I had an account where I could say, you know what, hey, if you're working 8 hours a day just to clean up the community, you can walk around from block to block, clean up, sweep. Well, it teaches them to take pride in their community. But at the end of the day, they're not volunteering, because I'm always asking people to volunteer. But I know that gets a little worn out. They might run from me when they see me because I'm only asking you to volunteer. But I think we should have a pot where people in their own communities can go out and work and clean up. And at the end of the week, here's your paycheck. Here's your cash. We appreciate you. Because at the end of the day, economics, we know, is a factor. Our young people, there are a lot of young people in our neighborhood who are at the gas station every single day pumping gas. Why? Because there's not that much food in the house. So they feel better at 10, 11, 12 years old pumping gas so they can buy their own food, whether it's from the Chinese store or the soul food store or even from A Plus or whatever it might be, because they don't have anything. So if we could find a pot for those who and give them something, because again, it's, hey, I can do what you're asking to do, Mr. Rich, but what am I going to get out of it? just to
Yeah.
thank you, that ain't enough. It's not enough.
I feel you.
So how can we find some economic resources, some dollars that we can provide to some of these young people? And as we're providing that to them, we're also mentoring them and teaching them. If you're
Well,
going to work,
Brother
let's
Richard,
do this. Yes,
yeah,
you
that's going to be one of our upcoming shows. We're going to bring you back to talk about that community economic resources, because I feel like that's exactly one of the key things that we need, but also one of the things that's missing. When you talk about the church has played a big role in the survival of the African American community in this country since the very beginning. And I think one of the things we see is that it has not truly adapted the way it needs to across the country in a lot of our communities. But I want to make sure we give Inspector Wood an opportunity to get his soapbox ready. Come on in, give us a sermon before we wrap things up, and tell us what are some things that you're hopeful about. What are some solutions that you recommend or that you see happening that we as individuals and as communities can implement or support to help reduce this violence in our communities?
Well, I'll start off with how you can work with the police department to do that. And one of the things is get involved. There are 21 districts in the city. So anyone listening and everybody on this call, you can go to your local district, walk in and say, when's the next captain's meeting? You can go online or phillypolice.com and get the information for everything is basically Zoom right now because of COVID. And find out what's going on in your district, be involved, be the eyes and ears out there, let the captain and his people know who you are, what block you live on. Also attend the PSA meetings. If you know young people who are looking for things to do, we have Police Explorers, Police Athletic League. We also have Police District Advisory Council, which basically that council works with the captain, advise them on different things they like to see in the district, help support the cops, and also we're there to support you. Those are some of the things you can do. You also can join the Citizens Academy, where you go up to the police academy, you find out about our policies, you go through some of the training we go through to see what it's like being a police officer in certain instances. So that's very important. And also I think is important. Many times I go to meetings and people are misinformed or underinformed about what we do in our policies. They're all online for you to look at. So I encourage everyone to go to phillypolice.com, hit the icon for accountability and read our policies so you understand what we go through. And I mean, what our policy directives are, and also for your own edification. And then when you speak about it, you know what you're talking about. But some things that, for example, the chokehold that they did in Minneapolis, that's been barred here in Philly for a very long time. But something we wouldn't do. If you did do it, you would be fired in a lot of or a charge here a long time ago. So those are some of the things that if you looked at our policy, you would note that. Something I think that's very important to reducing violent crime is supporting the mentoring groups. You mentioned earlier. That's with James and also Kendra. I think it's a phenomenal organization. Some of you in here have your own nonprofit. I think that city council needs to really support that. The city as a whole needs to support those groups. These young kids need something to do when they get done school. Maybe they won't join the gang because they have family, have that connection. Parks and Rec should be open until 8 or 9 o'clock every single day and extended hours on weekends every single day of the year, including holidays. That's something that we need to do in the city. And also, conflict resolution needs to be taught from kindergarten until 12th grade, because I think it's very important. People don't know how to deal with conflict in the city, and it leads to, I know it's not anything new. It's a lot of things that go behind that. I think if we teach that in schools, and I don't know if we already do that, but it's something we need to expand on, because I think that some of the violence we have are things that people can really just shake a hand and think about it, before they pick that gun up and shoot another person. And those things are not free. They obviously cost money, but everything everyone said, I think I agree with 100%. Those things are being done individually and collectively in the community. When people do come in and gentrify the neighborhood, people in the neighborhood need to meet with them and say, hey, this is what we need, this is what we're doing here, how can you help? I think that in communities that are better, the blocks are the same, because even though West Philly is a violent area in some parts, sometimes you have a block that's really peaceful. And it'll be, you know why? Because people on that block, when someone moves on that block, they talk to them and tell them, this is what we expect. And you got to fall in line with what we do here. And if you don't, it's going to be a problem. Not violence, but just we want to talk to you and things like that. So I think it's important to get to know your neighbors. And just to finish up, the police department is here to service you. And a lot of people don't understand that. And so when you got to get to know us, we want to know you as well. We have meetings, we come out, my captains and officers walk the beat. But I want you to know that you always can come in and demand to know when's the next meeting is occurring and get involved and get to know us and get to know your department. Because in the other parts of the city I worked in that were more affluent and had less crime, a lot of people did know their officers, did come in there and did make a connection with us. And I think it'll be it'll make everything better for everybody involved in this process to make us a better city if people get to know each other and get to know each other on a first name basis. And I think that first step is doing that is people who are listening to get involved and go into your local district and talk to them and find out exactly when the meetings are and listen and then get feedback. And it's your job is not your job, but it's your right to let us know when we're falling short of what you expect. And we got to meet that bar. So I think it's very important, like I said, to make sure you let us know what we need to do. We need to improve that, and we'll do our best to get to that, meet your expectations.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Honestly, I think that's it. I think that's it. You know, we got a chance to cover a lot tonight. We got a chance to touch on so many different things. I really hope that you guys are willing to come back again, because I feel like we've just scratched the surface on so many of the things that we talked about tonight. I really feel that, you know, something that was shared earlier was this perspective on the ebb and flow of violence. And the COVID-19 pandemic and the quarantine notwithstanding, you know, summertime is heating up. And oftentimes it's a time in major cities like Philadelphia that that show an increase in violence and in homicides. And so I'm just praying that that's not the case this year. And even though we are, as Derrick, Inspector Woods mentioned, that we're 22% above last year's homicide rate at this point, I'm hoping that we can do something collectively to stem that tide. I also was hoping that we could share resources. I've been trying to type some stuff in the Facebook chat. So feel free, as we go around this one last time before we say goodnight, share your organization and how people can get in touch with you, whether it's that your email or social media. All right. So we'll want to start with Ms. Kendrick, and we'll go around. Share your contact information and how we can get more information about the work you do.
Sure. You can contact me through email. So that would be Kendrick, KENDRICK, J, at email or at chop.email.edu.
.email.edu.
Yep.
Okay. Brother Richard, how can we get in touch with you?
Okay, you can also reach me through email, and I'll leave my number as well. Email is rwashington, first initial last name, rwashington@mybetfamily.com. MYBET, as in bringing everybody together. mybetfamily.com, and my number is 267-688-3783. 267-688-3783.
Excellent. Inspector Woods, how can we get in contact with you?
Give you my email is Derrick, DERRICK .Wood, WOOD @phila.gov.
Excellent. And last but not least, Ty McCoy, how can we get in touch with you?
You can send me an email at tyricemccoy@gmail.com. That's TYRICEMCCOY@gmail.com. Check me out on Instagram at generate_abundance. And on my website, www.generateabundance.com. I am also on Psychology Today.
Excellent, excellent. I appreciate all the information that you've shared. Ihsan, Brother Ihsan, you want to wrap us up?
Absolutely. Thank you all. This was special. Ty, I know we've celebrated the moment that you had, but it really was a transition in what was heavy, and it just brought a peace and calm. So I just appreciate everyone. I wanted to ask our guests and also the other people on the panel to pray for Inspector Wood. He is a police officer right now at a time in this city and in this world where there's a lot of hatred that's going towards the badge, and it shouldn't be going towards him. It shouldn't be going towards a majority of the police. And a few bad apples have caused a lot of hatred. Just say prayers, because that's a human being right there. It's a human being in uniform, but he's a human being.
Thank you.
And just thank you all. This conversation was rich. It was important. It was special. I believe there were some resources that were important to bring up, and also mention and support. MBK Cares is a nonprofit organization, and we have some solutions that we haven't even implemented yet. We haven't gotten beyond the concerts and the community conversations at the library or the Wellness Wednesday. But we have some plans that we want to implement over the next year or so once outside is fully functioning. Community, I'm sorry, is it cooperative? The cooperation, I actually forgot the name of the initiative, but we have an initiative to actually bring together people in different areas that are being gentrified. I ask everyone to support bringing everybody together, that organization, BET. If you can fund that nonprofit organization, you can further encourage Brother Richard to continue to do the work he's doing, and also provide resources so that he can do it even more effectively and efficiently. Also, Yeah Philly, they have a website, yeahphilly.org. Support them. I know that they do what they say they're going to do with the resources that they receive. And I know that they're doing something that is bringing empowerment to young people and actually helping young people understand what it is to see themselves different. And that's changing the way that they respect themselves when it comes to presenting themselves to other people so that other people see them differently. One last point I wanted to talk about supporting, because that was seeming to be a theme on Facebook comments. There's an organization known as Reboot. Reboot Constructive Services was created by a panelist we had on here previously named Cody Nixon. And it was meant to bring carpentry training to people in the minority community so that they can get jobs that can pay them $50 and up. So that way you actually reduce violence, you reduce drug dealing, you reduce so many other levels of crime because you're empowering people to learn a skill that can also boost their economic power. So I wanted to make sure that people realize there are some organizations out there to support. MBK Cares, our website is being redeveloped. It'll actually be relaunching next week, the beginning of July, and you'll be able to make donations there. We're going to do the work regardless of the donations, but it does help to donate to Yeah Philly, to MBK Cares, to bringing everybody together and spread the information and the love. And as I said before, please pray for Officer Wood and any other officers. These are heart issues when we're talking about violence. These are always conditions of the heart. God changes hearts. God changes our minds. Processes of trauma and all that stuff is in his hands. So at the end of the day, all the solutions we talk about, all the solutions that we recognize and all the problems we're aware of, they're for God to address best. And if we seek him, he can use us in professional ways to get done his will. So I appreciate everyone for your time, your attention. Eric, thank you again, man. Brother, I don't know what I'd do without you. I appreciate everyone out there, all of our Facebook audience, all of our YouTube audience. Please subscribe. Next week, we're going to have an excellent discussion. Eric, do you remember the name of the theme for next week? I know it was very heavy.
It's really basically the contrast between American independence and African American freedom.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to that discussion.
Yeah, that's going to be a heavy one, but it's going to be good. It's going to be rich.
And that's going to be our final episode actually for season 1. We'll be taking a 3-week break and we'll resume July 29th. So July 1st will be our last episode of season 1. And we're going to specifically talk about the things Eric just mentioned because July 4th is coming up. And we recognize that between Juneteenth and July 4th, there's a lot of stuff in between that needs to be discussed because that doesn't apply to everyone. But we're not going to just complain or present problems. We are going to talk about solutions, and we're going to hear from some people who know history very well. I encourage everyone to pray for somebody that you're having a hard time forgiving. I encourage everyone to forgive the person in your mirror, and I encourage everyone to go for a walk, read, journal, listen to some peaceful music. And if you need a good therapist, I recommend Tyrice McCoy. She just proved tonight that she is equipped and that she is blessed and capable. All right. Thank you all for your time and your attention. We'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a peaceful night, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good one. It was a pleasure.
It's just us. It's just us, bro.
All right, I was trying to end the live stream. I was still talking. I mean, still we're going live.